It came to my attention recently that Mega Man X3 was a bad game. Wait a minute, a bad Mega Man game on Super Nintendo? Okay, we can forget about Mega Man Soccer, that sucked. But X3 was a late released SNES title and one of my childhood favorites. Is it possible that I was just throwing on my nostalgia glasses and ignoring the faults in this game? Well, I don't know, let's check it out. This is my comprehensive review of Mega Man X3. Let's start with the plot. The remaining Reploids from the X series have gathered together with the aid of Dr. Doppler to create a utopia called Doppeltown. A few months later, the old Mavericks of the world began rioting and causing chaos. It seems that Dr. Doppler was behind these riots, and it's up to Mega Man and Zero to once again jump into the fight they have been desperately trying to end for years. Soon after Mega Man and Zero leave to go battle the Mavericks, their headquarters are attacked by Doppler's Reploids, and that's where your story begins. Throughout the game, Dr. Doppler will send out more lackeys named Bit and Byte, as well as a returning villain named Vile from the other X games. These offer a nice bit of added difficulty later in the game. Towards the end, Mega Man learns that his old nemesis Sigma is behind all of these problems and is actually nothing more than a computer virus that has infected Dr. Doppler. I suppose he's sort of the Agent Smith of this story. Somehow Zero is connected to Sigma as well, so I believe that if Zero dies, Sigma dies, and maybe that's the only way to truly get rid of him. Spoilers? Seems kinda sad actually. Next, let's discuss the gameplay. In typical Mega Man X fashion, the game starts on a prologue type stage. You defeat an oversized boss and then you are thrown into the stage select menu. From there you can pick any stage to go to, each with their own difficulties and power-ups. Some bosses are easier than others, with Mega Man's default low health and no weapon upgrades. Some stages, such as Blizzard Buffalo, have a power-up that you're going to want right away. This stage, like the Chill Penguin stage in Mega Man X1, contains the leg upgrade, which allows for better and advanced mobility, which is invaluable in obtaining new upgrades throughout the game. I'll be talking more about upgrades later on. X3 has very polished controls, but I find the default dash settings to be a little wonky. To fix this, I went into the options and I changed my dash to R, which feels a little bit more natural to me. Like the previous two X games in the series, the controls are incredibly crisp and polished. There may not be a series with better controls on the Super Nintendo console. My one gripe, however, and it's kinda big, is that once you get the arm upgrade, the new fully powered shot seems to feel iffy at best. If I weren't interested in getting the secret golden upgrade at the end of the game, I might actually skip this power up. This is just one instance of this upgrade being so slow that I couldn't properly jump afterwards, getting smashed by this boss. It looks cool as shit, but ultimately, well, feels like shit. Unfortunately, you can't get a lot of the upgrades unless you get this arm. During any of the non-boss encounters in X3, you can freely swap between using Mega Man or Zero during gameplay. Early on, Zero is obviously the stronger character, but if he dies, he's dead for the rest of the game, and it's possible you may miss out on certain cutscenes or get a different ending. That being said, it helps to swap to him when Mega Man's life gets low, and you're just trying to make it to the boss in one piece. Upgrades that Mega Man receives from Dr. Light throughout the game do not transfer over to Zero, so eventually he's pretty much useless outside of some speedrunning. Much like every other non-soccer related English Mega Man game, once you defeat a stage boss, you absorb some of their powers. I'll be honest, X3 does not do a good enough job in making those new powers feel, well, useful. Primarily the only thing they're good for is unlocking new areas and upgrades, as well as defeating other bosses who are weak to them. It sounds like this is unique to X3, but really it's not. Most of the Mega Man games feel this way, so I won't ramble on too much about this. I will say that Mega Man X1 had some pretty good uses for the weapon upgrades. The Storm Tornado and the homing missiles each have their own moments to shine when dealing with difficult enemies. Let's go over the level design. This was listed as one of the main points that made Mega Man X3 a bad game, and I can actually say that I agree with this. The level design in X3 is pretty average, if you compare it to other X games. There aren't a ton of unique enemies, nor are there really a lot of real challenges with any of the sub-bosses right away. Levels feel somewhat linear, with few secrets that aren't that hard to find. One thing I really liked though was the replayability of each stage, and none really felt like a chore to get through. There's a lot more backtracking in X3 than previous titles. A lot of areas require certain upgrades like the Tornado Fang or Superpowered Gravity Well, Frost Shield, and Triad Thunder in order to reach certain power-ups. Bosses felt difficult to me during my first playthrough, where I wasn't following a guide or a boss order while just trying to figure it out on my own. Certain bosses like Tunnel Rhino were pretty easy, while compared to like Crush Crawfish was pretty difficult. The mini boss fight with Bite is also not that easy without using Neon Tiger's ability. I also really enjoyed the hidden Vial stage that becomes available after you defeat a few stages. It has a timed escape element that I've always really enjoyed for whatever reason. The Doppler stages unfortunately felt extremely easy when compared to other X titles. These stages are typically the hardest in every Mega Man game, but we're over pretty quick in X3. One other point I'd like to mention is the rather uneventful use of ride armors in the game. You have to unlock them in X3 and they don't become available right away. Their only use is to unlock other power-ups, so essentially it's a power-up that only unlocks other power-ups. It's kinda lame. How about the graphics? Mega Man X3 has some of the more vibrant and crisp graphics on the Super Nintendo. Everything looks great, and there are some really fun effects in a lot of areas. The background art is all very detailed and fun to look at. The boss designs are pretty cool as well. I love some of the 3D aspects to this game, like this mini boss and the Sigma virus. I'm playing on a standard SNES with an RGB SCART setup, and this game looks amazing. This was always my favorite design of Mega Man from an art standpoint. Take a look at this artwork from Nintendo Power issue 81. I was in love with this art as a child, and I still love it now. So we've gone over the graphics, but how about the sound? Alright, I'll start off with saying that the sound really isn't anything amazing. However, it's not really that bad. It's just, I don't know, kind of average. Here are a few tracks that I enjoyed, and let's compare it to other tracks that I enjoyed from Mega Man X1. Take a little bit to hear the difference in quality. For me, even the best stuff in X3 sounds pretty basic compared to X1. It might sound like a major complaint, but it's really not, and I'll expand on that in a moment. Here are my final thoughts on Mega Man X3. It may sound like I'm being pretty harsh on Mega Man X3, but let's take a step back here. When I'm comparing X3 to X1 so often, it's because X1 for me is one of my favorite action platformers of all time, and X3 is a distant sequel to it. Mega Man X1 is a masterpiece, and it set the standards of what a high-paced action game should look like on the Super Nintendo. Few other games accomplish that feat, and they're held in extremely high regards. For me personally, I'm referring to Donkey Kong Country and Super Mario World. So is X3 the best Mega Man game on Super Nintendo? No. But overall, is it a bad game? Hell no. I played through this a couple different times in the past few days, not because I had to in purposes for a review, but because I wanted to feel a different experience each time. There are hidden power-ups that I didn't go into full details on, and they're called chip upgrades. You can only collect one of these upgrades per playthrough. There is also a hidden upgrade near the end of the game that gives you all 4 of these chips at once. It's often referred to as the Golden Armor. On my first playthrough, I missed the Golden Armor, so I went back through the game again, much faster this time, and then I finally received the Golden Armor. To me, this is the coolest armor upgrade in the entire X series, and it brought back a waterfall of nostalgia for me. One thing I forgot, however, is to grab the Zero Saber on my second playthrough, so someday I'm gonna have to go back and play again to get it. And that's the thing about Mega Man X3. You're probably not going to experience the full game on your first playthrough. It brings replay value to this title, and it never felt like a chore to me. So for me, the graphics are great, the controls are great, the story is actually pretty interesting for a Mega Man game, and the sound is above average if you compare it to 90% of the overall Super Nintendo library. As Nintendo Power put it, if you played one Mega Man game, you've played them all. So I'll close with saying this: everyone is entitled to their own opinion, to view what they see as a good or bad video game. In my opinion, labeling Mega Man X3 as a bad game puts it into the same league of mediocre to bad games, such as like Porky Pig's Haunted Adventure, Home Alone 2 Lost in New York, Wayne's World, Home Improvement, and plenty of others. I regard X3 as a fantastic game and a must-play for any hardcore fans of the fast style of action platformer. It does come with a steep price of around $150 to $200, so I won't say whether or not it's worth it, so I'll leave that up to you. You can play it on either GameCube or PlayStation 2 as part of the Mega Man X collection for a small fraction of that cost. I'd recommend the PS2 version because the controller works so much better for this style of game. So that all being said, I personally give Mega Man X3 a solid showing of 4 out of 5 stars. I'd like to just take a moment to thank you for watching. Mega Man was by far my favorite video game series as a child, and it always brings back a lot of great memories. I hope you enjoyed my review, but also give Mega Man X3 a try, and let me know what you think about it in the comments below.